Welcome back to a Saint a Week, and this week we have Saints Adrian and Natalia, husband and wife in the early 4th century, where two souls were mutually sanctified, each drawing the other toward God, even unto death. So let's go back. It's the early 4th century. The Roman Empire is ruled by the Tetrarchy, and in 303 AD, the world saw the suffering of many Christians with the Great Persecution. This Great Persecution was the last and most severe persecution of Christians in the Roman Empire. It's worth noting as well, this Great Persecution started off with a goal of systemic destruction of the Christian religion rather than just punishing individuals. It was intense from the start, nonetheless, focusing on dismantling the institutional infrastructure of the church, particularly in the Eastern Roman Empire. It started off with Christians being stripped of their duties in high positions, churches being overturned, scriptures being burned, and as we know, over the coming weeks, it would become much more brutal, with Christians eventually being exiled and tortured or executed. And it is this exact time in history which births the story of the amazing saints, husband and wife, Saint Adrian and Saint Natalia. So who was Adrian? Adrian was a guard of high rank at the imperial court in Nicomedia, which was the eastern capital of the Roman Empire. The Emperor Diocletian used Nicomedia as his primary residence. Saint Adrian was in a position of significant authority in the imperial administration. Adrian was young, successful, and a pagan. And he also held an important role in the persecutions. That is, sitting in the torture chambers, recording the names and responses of Christians being interrogated under torture. You see, these records, often known as acta or proconsular records, were part of the formal bureaucratic trials where Christians were interrogated, asked to renounce their faith, and sentenced. The documentation served both practical and political purposes, ensuring that the authorities kept track of those who challenged Roman religions, the Roman religious side of things, and also the state authority. So yeah, he was there to document the official proceedings, but never had to inflict the suffering, but brutal nonetheless. It is here, in a place so dark, where young Adrian is brought to the light. 23 Christians were brought before the imperial examiners, each were tortured and each refused to apostatize. It was in these moments Adrian noticed something about the Christians who were being tortured, and it wasn't only how well they endured intense pain, but it was their demeanour, the peace and joy each one had, something which he had never seen before. The suffering seemed to not reach them in the way it would reach an ordinary man. They each spoke of reward and of God with such certainty, such confidence and resolute. They knew something Adrian did not. It was here in the chamber, his eyes gazed at one of the Christians, and he leaned forward and asked them the question that had been building in him. What reward do you expect from your God that makes you endure this? One of the Christians answered with a passage from St. Paul. Eye hath not seen, nor ear heard, neither have entered into the heart of man the things which God hath prepared for them that love him. Adrian set down his stylus. He turned to the other imperial scribes sitting at the table and said words that would cost him everything on earth. Write my name down with theirs, for I also am a Christian. This declaration was instant and absolute. There was no period of catechesis, no private reflection, no gradual drawing toward the faith. Something in the combination of those suffering, joyful faces, those particular words, the sheer incomprehensibility of a reward that transcended all human imagination, collapsed the distance between Adrian the pagan administrator and Adrian the martyr in waiting. He was immediately arrested, still in his official court clothes, and led to prison. The bureaucrat had become the prisoner. This type of conversion is known as at the site of the martyrs. It's the type of conversion in which the witness of those dying for the faith becomes the direct catalyst of someone else's faith. Adrian's conversion belongs to one of the most ancient and consistently attested patterns of how Christianity spread in the Roman Empire, not by argument alone, but by the beauty of those willing to die for what they believed. So now is a good time to ask, well, who was Natalia? Natalia was Adrian's wife. She in fact was a Christian. However, a Christian in secret, which there were many of them, given the recent persecutions we discussed earlier. She had even kept her faith secret from her husband, Adrian, because again, the social and legal dangers of open Christian profession were severe. And think about a husband's role in the Roman Empire. He was a relatively high-rank guard. You can only imagine the impact this would have on him as well as her if the emperor discovered this secret. That one of his own wife, Adrian's wife, was in fact a Christian. For years, Natalia had been praying in secret at personal risk for a husband who did not yet share in the faith. Her marriage was already a sacrament being lived unilaterally. Her love, her faithfulness, her daily sacrifice of concealment were all oriented toward a God her husband did not know. And when he found that God, it was in no small part because Natalia had been holding the candle for both of them in the dark. And now the man she loved, who she had kept her secret from, had discovered the secret on his own, through exactly the experience she would have prayed for him. She rushed to the prison, not to mourn, not to beg him to recant, not to despair about the future. She went, the sources say, to encourage him, to tell him that what he had done was right, that the glory he was running toward was worth more than anything he was leaving behind. And there is a famous line attributed to her in this first prison visit, which the tradition has preserved because it captures something essential about her character. She told him his earthly nobility was nothing compared to the crown he was about to receive. The period between Adrian's arrest and his execution was not brief. He was held for a time, examined, tortured, and given many opportunities to recant. Women were not allowed to visit male prisoners at the time, but Natalia would not let this stop her. She had cut her hair, dressed as a boy to gain access. Natalia's love for her husband transcended not merely social convention, but the physical limits placed on it by imperial authority. Nothing that could be done to keep her from him was sufficient. Natalia had been a Christian for years. She knew what it meant to call yourself a Christian. She knew that her husband was in the very early stages of his faith. Although it was a radical and complete conversion, the brutal torture from the Roman guards, these were the conditions she knew in which a new convert might waver. She was there simply not out of marital love, but out of spiritual purpose, to be the experienced believer who strengthened the new one. She had been living in faith for years. He had been living in it for days. She was, functionally, his spiritual director as well as his wife. The tradition records that she would hold his hand through the prison bars, that she kissed the wounds from his torture, that she spoke to him of the glory of the martyrs and the promises of Scripture. She was, in every way that mattered, holding him in faith while the imperial machinery worked to break it out of him. When the time came, Adrian and the other Christian prisoners were brutally executed. Their limbs were broken on an anvil before death, Adrian's hands and legs were shattered, one by one. Yet he did not renounce his faith. Natalia remained by his side throughout. In a striking moment, she herself placed his hand on the anvil as the soldiers prepared to strike. Not out of cruelty, but to steady him in his final act of faith. She became both witness and supporter of his martyrdom. Afterward, as the bodies were to be burned, Natalia recovered Adrian's right hand and kept it as a sacred relic, an act of love, devotion, and belief in the enduring presence of the saints. After Adrian's martyrdom, Natalia fled to Byzantium, taking Adrian's hand with her and living among Christians in prayer and mourning. Adrian later appeared to her in a vision, telling her she would soon join him. The vision was understood not as a comfort against a distant death, but as a promise of an imminent one, and Natalia received it with the same disposition she had brought to every stage of their journey, not with dread, but with joy. She had spent years secretly leading her husband toward God. Now he was coming back to lead her the final step of the way. Shortly afterward, she died peacefully in her sleep. Though not executed, she is honoured as a martyr. Her long endurance, her faith, suffering, and devotion was seen as a martyrdom of the soul. The Eastern Church's understanding of her death is theologically precise. Her suffering throughout the entire ordeal, the years of hidden faith, the vigils at the prison, the disguises, the standing at the execution, the watching of her husband's body burned, constituted a martyrdom of the soul. Even when her body remained physically intact, she is venerated as a martyr, not despite dying in peace, but because her entire life after Adrian's arrest had been a sustained act of martyrial witness and love. So yeah, that concludes this week's episode. Thanks for watching.